Hi, I'm Russ Bray, and you're listening to the weekly Dartscast. 180!
Hello, and welcome to an episode of the weekly Dartscast, a very special episode. It's our 300th episode. I'm Alex Moss, and joining me, as he has done from the very first episode up until now, it is, of course, my co-host, Darts statistician, Burton, DeWitt. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. 3 consecutive big episodes is 300, 301, and 302. All big numbers in darts. Trio of sensational episodes coming forward for everyone. How are you, Alex?
It certainly is. Yeah, I'm doing okay, thank you. We mentioned on the show recently about your success on the Oki winning tournament. So I'm glad to report to our listeners that I won a tournament on Sunday, and I've got to read the small print where it says that there was only 5 players in the tournament, myself, my brother, and 3 of our friends that don't really play darts, but I'm going to take it as a win. So I'm celebrating that. And of course, we are celebrating another milestone for this podcast, and we'll touch on that in a second. We'll just mention our guest that we've got coming on for this episode. We've got Jonny Clayton, the Ferret, a man who's won the last 2 nights of the Premier League. He's back on the show. We've also got Martin Foulds, who's the boss of ZXF Sports Management. His stable of players, including Nathan Aspinall, Chris Dobey, Luke Littler. He joins us, as does live from his hotel room in Torremolinos, Jacklin, back on the programme. First time we've had him on since 2019, an extended chat coming up with him. So lots to get to there. But before we do, let's get on to this episode. And it's another 100 episodes in the books. We've reached the 300 mark. But let's start the show with a look back at episodes 201 to now and what's happened in the world of darts since May 2021. What has most caught your eye?
Yeah, I mean, May 2021 is like a weird time in history because at that point we were already a year into the pandemic. We were all used to it. But we also didn't know what was going to happen a week from now because that was, right at the outbreak of the Delta wave, right before, rather, the outbreak of the Delta wave that really took all the progress from months of vaccination drive and threw it into question. And still, it was looking like we were starting to have events in front of crowds. We weren't sure if that was going to continue. There was still the question, especially about whether events could go forward in Germany where higher restrictions were going on. So thinking back to May 2021, it was a weird time in the history of darts. But boy, how have things changed in just a little under 2 years. And if you look at what happened from that point on, we started to see crowds return, obviously at the World Match Play that summer. We'll come back to that. And then at the, as the year went on, especially at the World Championships, when we had full crowds, granted, we didn't get all the matches played. We had a bunch of players had to pull out due to COVID that year. But then especially as we head into 2022 and finally had really a return to normalcy, the 13 Euro Tour events back on the calendar like things used to have been, all the majors back in their normal time frame with the exception of the Champions League, which has not returned since pre-pandemic times, but everything else returned in their normal calendar spot with a full crowd. And we've really had now a little over a year of the old normal being the new normal again. Some of the old normal has not returned. And the biggest part of that is dominance at the top. Yes, by May 2021, Michael van Gerwen was no longer the dominant force he had once been. In fact, he hadn't won an event yet in that calendar year, and he didn't win one all the way until well into the autumn when he won the Nordic Darts Masters over Fallon Sherrick. He added a Players' Championship event as well. But he ended the year with just 2 titles, a far cry from the 20-plus that he had done a few years earlier. And while 2022 saw him really rebound, winning 4 major titles, winning a bunch of others, and we've seen signs that he will do that again this year. He hasn't won a major yet, but he's lost a pair of finals, and he's top of the Premier League table by 5 points. He's not back to that dominance he was before that. What has replaced it? Well, what we've seen is a lot of breakthrough successes and a lot of real surprises as well. Ross Smith and Andrew Gilding were not 2 players we would have tipped if you asked me in May 2021 at our 200th episode who will become a first-time major by first-time major champion by episode 300. Both of them have, and both of them deservedly so. Ross Smith was the best player in the European Championships. Andrew Gilding, I wouldn't say he was the best player in the UK Open, but he played very, very well. And he's been the best player in some other tournaments so far over the last year and a half that he didn't win. But it was also breakthroughs for players we had been waiting to see them break through. Obviously, Joe Cullen a little over a year ago winning the Masters, a player that was a fly on the dartboard away from making the World Match Play final a few years ago. Didn't make it, lost that match to Gary Anderson, and then couldn't find his way back in a major, despite having chances, having the dart at Bull to beat MVG, of course, but then finally got his chance at the Masters last year and went on and won it. He's, of course, not the only one to break through. Chris Dobey this year as well at the Masters, but the big one, of course, was Michael Smith at the 9th time of asking, winning a major final at the Grand Slam last year. And then, okay, the World Championships is not as big as the Grand Slam. It's just a small little event. He added that as a second prize as well and also became world number 1. No big deal. But we've seen so many breakthroughs over the last few years, and we've seen a diversity of winners that we have not had before. It's been a really fascinating, not quite 2 years, but 23 months. And there's no sign of it slowing down. Yes, Michael van Gerwen is better than he was 2 years ago, but so many players are as well. And now we have Gerwyn Price, who was the world number 1 when we had our 200th episode. He's now world number 4, but I think he is a much more complete player now than he was then. So too for almost everyone in the top 10. I think that's the big thing that's changed. Now we have so many players who believe that they can win titles, and they've actually gone and done it. And that's been the big thing that's happened from episode 200 to episode 300.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. And you said it at the start there, May 2021, almost 2 years ago now, and the situation that we were in the world back then, still in the pandemic, and darts, as far as in the UK, was still behind closed doors. And later that month, we did see small crowds start to come back with the last block of Premier League nights in Milton Keynes, up to 1,000 fans in for each of those nights. Milton Keynes, of course, back then was the new home of World Darts, was hosting a lot of the events, and things were different back then because we had the last league night of the Premier League, and then the next night was the playoffs, and we saw Jonny Clayton, one of the guests on the show this week, won the last game of the league phase to get that 4th spot, get into the playoffs. And then the following night, 24 hours later, wins the playoffs and gets his hands on the biggest invitational title there is in the game. And you look what he went on to go and do later that year as well, winning more titles. Peter Wright won a few big titles that year, and going into 2022, becoming world champion for the second time. And 2022, we, as you say, we did see Michael van Gerwen get back on top at times, winning the Premier League, the Match Play, the Grand Prix, other titles as well. But as you say as well, the first time winners, something that we saw happen during the pandemic, that's something that has carried on with the likes of Danny Noppert, Ross Smith. But I think one of the most high profile stories in darts the last 2 years has been Michael Smith becoming that major winner, because he's come close on so many occasions, finally getting over the line at the Grand Slam, then winning the World Championships and becoming the new world number 1. And it's something that a lot of people in the sport thought would happen, and he's finally got there. And it has been an interesting period these last 2 years, because we have seen spells where there's been certain players, they've looked untouchable. I think of Peter Wright, the World Match Play 2021 was Phil Taylor-esque in that week, and we thought he's going to take some real stopping if he carries on playing like that. And the same with Michael van Gerwen. He's had spells where he's looked untouchable, and the last few weeks, Gerwyn Price, the run that he's had winning those Euro Tours, and Michael Smith coming back into it just this past weekend, winning on the Euro Tour. So yeah, I think what you say is right there. In this current era of the PDC at that highest level, it is difficult to sustain that spell of dominance, because there are so many players now capable of winning these events. And just away from the PDC, outside of the PDC, what we've seen the last 2 years, we've had the Women's World Championship come back via the WDF after a 2-year absence. And I think the women's game is something that has got a lot of interest. And the PDC, we've seen their interest in the women's game grow with the Women's Series, with their own televised event, the Women's World Match Play as well, the dominance of Bo Greaves. And you think of the potential that she's got. You go to Luke Littler as well, the potential he's got at just 16 years old, his debut at the UK Open recently, and what he did on the development tour, winning 2 titles. So there's 2 young players there still in their teens that have got real bright futures in the game. And I think the PDC, they've got their house in order. They're now making strides again after the pandemic halted their progress a little bit. They're now pushing into new territories. The World Series coming up in Poland. They're looking at other places. We had Bahrain at the start of the year, but I think as far as the rest of what we've got, there's not really a clear number 2 at the moment as it used to be. We had the PDC, then the BDO. At the moment, we've got the PDC clear at the top. Underneath that, you've got the WDF, you've got the ADC, Modus, the Seniors Tour. They've all got their place, but we don't have a clear number 2 at the moment. They're all doing their part, and it's going to be interesting, I think, to see where we are in 2 years from now as regards to that second rung on the ladder, if you like, organisations outside the PDC, because I think they've all got their place in darts, but as far as how far they all progress over these next 2 years, I think that's something to keep an eye on.
Well, let's talk a little bit more, though, about the last 100 episodes and what's gone on. On episode, I can't speak today. On episode 200, I guess this episode must be the French word for that. So we'll go with that. We're a global show. On episode 200, we spoke about our all-time favorite guests from the first 4+ years of the show. But how does that list look now after another 100 episodes?
Yeah, I can't blame you this week. We are quite excited to hit this milestone of 300 episodes. And again, I probably said it when we got to 200 episodes, but we are in a fortunate position with this show where we do get the opportunity to chat to a lot of different people in the game. And this is a platform that we've built that does give not just players, but other people involved in the sport a voice, a chance to tell their story. And it's one of my favourite things about doing this show is that we get to do that. And I had a look back at the last 100 episodes earlier, picked out some of the chats that I most enjoyed, and I've got to start from my trip to Lakeside. It was around this time last year, and meeting the GOAT, Coast on Pay. I've said the story before, but completely unexpected seeing Co there. I had no idea he was going to be at Lakeside, and got to meet him, have an in-person chat with him on the show that I did that week, and a picture as well. And later that day as well, seeing Dave Parletti, one of our longtime friends of the show, get his first win in a World Championship, and interviewing him moments after. We had a cameo from Steve Hine in the smoking area at Lakeside, which was quite funny as well. But I think the only thing missing that day was Dave bringing out the crane as his celebration, because we spent time with him during the day when he was getting ready, and we joked about him doing the crane in homage to Co, who was there at Lakeside that day. But I think just the buzz of getting that win, he completely forgot about it. But yeah, they're 2 chats that personally for me I'm always going to remember. And as far as our usual episodes, we're not on the road every week doing this show, but we are recording from home and get our guests on either Skype or on the phone for a chat. And yeah, there's been a lot of memorable ones in the last almost 2 years. And I think 2 players, you rewind to episode 200, that we'd never had on the show before, and that was 2 of the big names in darts, Michael van Gerwen and Simon Whitlock, and we've managed to get them both on for the first time, which is obviously great for us. And another big name in sport, not so much darts at the moment, but he could be in the future, and that is Eddie Hearn. And he was, we go back to episode 200, we had his dad on, Barry Hearn, and he discussed that he was stepping down as PDC chairman. Eddie was taking over, and Burton, you spoke with Eddie later that year, just before the World Championships, I think it was. And sticking with non-players, Emma Payton, who was our guest of the year from our listeners for 2021, we had her on a little while ago now, and as someone myself with a background in sports journalism, hearing her story of how she got to where she is now, working her way through the ranks at Sky Sports, I found that really interesting. And of course, she's taken over the reins from Dave Clark over the last few years and does a great job fronting the coverage for Sky with the darts. And just lastly, back to players, and they do make up the majority of our guests each week. I'll list off a few names, the likes of John Norman Jr., Matthew Kiernan's chat with Sean Wilkinson, Berry Van Peer, Martin Lukeman, Vladimir Anderson, Grant Sampson, Prakash Jiwa, Richie Burnett, Trina Gulliver. There's been loads, and I'll finish with one. And it took us ages to get him on, actually, a long time to finally get him on the show. And when we did, we ended up getting a shout out on the ITV broadcast, and that's Andrew Gilden. His interviews rarely last longer than 2 or 3 minutes, but we got a lot of time with him towards the back end of last year. And of course, last month we were fortunate to have him back on just 2 days after winning the UK Open. And what a legend, the People's Champion. So many memorable guests, and hopefully there's going to be more to come.
Yeah, there's some really good shouts, and a lot of the ones I was going to say as well. I mean, it is amazing that there are still players that we haven't had on who've been on tour for a while, because we've hit so many players now, even players that we didn't think we would ever get. But to finally get Simon Whitlock and Michael Van Geuren, as you mentioned, players who we've been trying for a while. For different reasons, they were difficult to track down, but we did finally get them. And that was really cool because it meant we were able to, for the first time, be able to say, especially after MVG, that we had gotten the entire top 10. Whitlock no longer in the top 10, but he's been in the top 10 while we've been doing this show. And he's been in the Premier League while we were doing this show, and we still weren't able to get him. So to be able to check both those names off was just on the administrative and planning side, a real relief. But you mentioned some of the other ones I was going to mention, obviously, in the non-player side, both Emma Payton and Eddie Hearn. I agree with those nominations. Your talk with Emma was just fantastic, and it's one of a deserving Guest of the Year award because she was a great guest and it was a great interview. Another one you did, I don't think you mentioned, surprisingly not, but Nathan Aspinall, who you had on at the beginning of last year when he was coming back from injury and talking about he wasn't sure if he'd be able to play again. And what happened? Well, he had probably his best year on tour, making 2 major finals, winning some other events, and just earning a spot back in the Premier League. And it's weird thinking of someone who's won a major in the past, but when he won that UK Open 4 years ago now, he was not the player he is now. He obviously has always had an A game that was really good. I remember tweeting the year he was off the circuit that it tells you just how ridiculous darts is that someone as good as he was is off the circuit. But he's only gotten better since then. And since that interview has only gone to new heights. And he set the tone for that in that interview. He set the tone for what was his biggest season to date. And he lived up to it. But I thought that was just possibly the best interview we've had in the last 2 years. But it goes to just when our interviews are at their best, it's, a lot of it comes down to the guest. And I think I've said this before. I might have even said this on the 200th episode. A lot of it comes down to the guest. But it does take some comfort on our end as well. And I don't mean that to talk ourselves up. But it does take building that camaraderie, building that trust with the players. And it's something that we've done over 6-7 years that gets them to tell us the truth and to speak honestly with us and speak honestly to everyone who's listening. And that's something that's really rewarding. I'll throw out one more player who we had the pleasure to sponsor a couple of years ago. We were sponsoring him actually I think we had just started sponsoring him at the time of our 200th episode. We might not have started yet, but we started around this time in 2021, and that's Callan Ritz, a player who, when we started sponsoring him, he was younger than he is now, obviously by 2 years. He was like 22 then, but he hadn't done many interviews. I think he had done a couple. Obviously, after he won his first pro tour, he had to do one with Dan Dawson, but he hadn't really done any long form interviews. But we got him on, obviously, then we were sponsoring, we got him on again, and his management wanted us to get him on as much as possible because it's building that comfort with interviewers and with someone you're familiar with. Even with the players that we haven't talked to before, their managers know us, everyone knows us, and just to have that comfort that they can speak honestly with us, it's something that I really value on this end, that the players trust us and their managers trust us and the media trusts us. And it has led to us getting some of these interviews that we wouldn't otherwise have gotten. And then obviously a shout out to Dave Allen, as always, whenever we're talking about our guests for the PDC, because he's helped us tremendously track down a lot of these players. We greatly appreciate that. But beyond that, most of the people you mentioned fully agree with, and hopefully we get even better ones for the next 100.
Echoing what you said there about Dave Allen, who also helped us set up our first guest on this week's show. Here's our chat with the former Premier League champion, the Ferret, Jonny Clayton. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by the former Premier League champion and Weekly Dartscast Player of the Year, Jonny Clayton. Thanks for the time, Jonny. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thanks. How are you guys?
Doing good, thank you. And there's lots to catch up on since we last had you on the show. It was just after you won the World Grand Prix towards the end of 2021 and you'd lost your voice after the final. So how is the voice today?
Voice is good today. The voice is really good today. He's back. So I need to start winning again, I think, to lose it again.
Yeah, always a good sign. Well, that win, that got you into the world's top 8. You followed it up by winning the World Series finals. So that was 4 major titles that year. Going into Ali Pali at the end of that year, did you feel any different to previous years, having had all that success?
Yes, obviously I think so. Do you know what I mean? Going in on form, confidence really high, darts were just landing, I think that year I could have shut my eyes and they were going where I dreamt of them going. But I think that year it was a fantastic season for myself. Going into our World Championships full of confidence. And then I bumped into Michael Smith, which I think is one of the best games that, that's been on the stage. So yeah, it's a fantastic feeling. Didn't go my way, but who knows, maybe I could have won the Worlds that year.
Definitely. You beat Keane Barry 3-2 in a thriller earlier in that tournament, but as you say, the run ended 4-3 to Michael Smith in the last 16, that last set going 6-4, and it won our match of the year. I know it won a lot of praise, that game. How did you reflect on that? And at the time, that was your best run that you'd had at Ali Pali as well.
Yeah, obviously there's highs and lows. The lows obviously was I'd lost the game, obviously. But when you're on that stage and you're in a very, very good game, like it was between me and Mike, one player has to win and one has to lose. Unfortunately I lost. But, I came off that stage with a really high feeling of, my darts are here. I've made a statement. I've proven to myself and everybody else what I can do. So it was a good feeling, and I'll always take highs. I've watched it back and back and back, just a reminder of how good the game was. So I come off the stage with a smile on my face. And when I watch it back now, when the kids are watching it now, I sit in the settee, maybe jokingly that I'm not interested, but I really am, because, it was a fantastic game of darts.
Yeah, it definitely was. And we move on to last year, 2022, and no surprises to see you in the field again for the Premier League. You were, of course, the defending champion and all the titles you'd won the year before, but it was a new experience for you with the return of the usual setup, touring the UK and Europe every Thursday in those big arenas. What was that experience like for you last year?
I'll never ever forget that, to be honest with you, because, like you say, the first year, to win the Premier League, nothing comes anywhere close. But, to tour the massive stadiums, great arenas that they put the Premier League in front of fantastic crowds, to be honest, crowds that enjoy the darts, crowds that know the songs, know the banters, know the players. That was an experience I'll never ever forget. When you walk into, we'll say for argument's sake, Rotterdam, just the sea of orange was fantastic, and and to play in front of my home crowd in Cardiff, you just don't forget things like that. It's a feeling that not only me, I think every player, once they play at their home venue, it's something else. It's fantastic.
And also last year we had the new format for the Premier League as well, with the nightly tournaments. We've had a full season of it. We're well into this second year of that format. What's the general consensus like among the players in the back room about this format now?
Mixed feelings, to be honest. Like I say, for the fun, I think it's fantastic, because you're there and you could see your favourite player play 3 times that night. You might not do if they go out first round, but for the fun, I think it's great. For the player, I think it's difficult. Like, do you know what I mean? Because you lift your game 3 times against the best in the world. Like, do you know what I mean? And I find it's difficult. It's hard. The concentration levels are going to be, really high. So it's different. I like it, but I obviously quite enjoyed the one game every night too. So my feelings are kind of up and down, to be honest. I think I prefer the 3-game night, the second, but not the 1-game night. But I do see why some players prefer the 1 game a night, do you know?
Yeah, fair enough. And well, we look back to last year's Premier League and it worked out pretty well for you, the new format. You were in the top 4 all year, you finished top of the table, and although it's not a title, how proud were you to join that small list of players that have finished top of the Premier League?
Yeah, fantastic. Year before, there's only 7 of us that's won the Premier League, and to become, to win the group, it's just put my name in history books again, and that's a great feeling, it's a part of an elite group, that my name is added to, so yeah, great.
and a few weeks later you were in Berlin for the playoffs, and a slow start cost you in that one, losing out 10-4 to Joe Cullen in the semi-finals. Was that a defeat which hurt for a little while?
Yeah, obviously it hurt, but, all jokes aside, whether it was a slow start or not, Joe Cullen played fantastic, and, I think his 180 throw-in was absolutely great. So I think that was the difference of that night. Joe kept me under pressure. Joe never gave me chances, and, obviously it hurt because, I topped the group, things are going my way, and obviously Joe pulled the handbrake up on that and put me out of the tournament. So, no, all fair play to Joe. He just put me to sleep, to be fair. He played fantastic darts, and you've got to take it on the chin.
Definitely. We know you're always gracious in defeat, and you had the 16, 17 weeks of the Premier League. That was the first time last year, but also a lot more World Series invites. You got to play at Madison Square Garden, Australia, New Zealand for the first time. How special was it to play those events for the first time as well?
Yeah, fantastic. Madison Square Gardens, when you see your name on or your photo up on the billboards and Times Square and on the ceiling of MSG, you must have made something right. You've made it in darts, like if your face is up there, But the fantastic atmosphere again, fantastic experience. Unbelievable. It's maybe without darts, maybe I'd never see some of these places. I don't think I'd have ever gone to Australia, which I thoroughly enjoyed. It was a great experience again. New Zealand, a little bit like Wales, a lot of green, a lot of grass, a lot of sheep. But to be honest, like I say, maybe without darts, maybe I'd have never ever seen Australia and New Zealand. So it's an honour to be a part of the PDC because it gives you a lot of chances in life. If you're good enough, they don't seem to forget about you. So, it was brilliant. What if, I was honoured to be a part of it, and I really enjoyed my time down there.
Yeah, it was a busy 2022 for you, and I think it was around June last year you said that your time working for the Carmarthenshire County Council as a plasterer, it could be coming to an end with how much time the darts was taking up. What were those last few days like, saying goodbye to your colleagues after all those years?
Yeah, well, the last year I was off on unpaid leave, so basically I wasn't in at all for that 12 months, and I had the choice of either staying with the council or trying to progress in my darts. So obviously darts came first, and it was difficult to say goodbye kind of thing. I've been there 27 years. I do miss the banter with all the lads. You don't see as many faces as what you did, knocking doors, doing jobs for people. So it's weird. It's kind of 100-mile-an-hour lifestyle, as in work. And then all of a sudden, it's nothing. It's just looking at the M4 every week. Do you know what I mean? So, no, it's different. But I think I've done the right decision.
Good to hear. And when we last spoke, you said you admitted yourself you were a lazy practicer, so you weren't sure how much you would change going full-time with the darts. So what has that adjustment been like so far?
I'm still a lazy practicer, but I think it shows with some of my results. But I am back on the board, and I have to. It just doesn't work by not being on that board. So it's putting my time and my head back together, trying to get my game back where it was, and cross fingers, I'll be around for a lot longer.
Yeah, we'll come on to the last few weeks in a moment where you've turned your season round in the Premier League. But let's get back to your darts. Fast forward to the end of last year, and you came out the right side of a last 16 thriller at Ali Pali, beating Josh Rock 4-3. And afterwards you said, I proved I can still play darts. So how much did that win mean to you and the way you did it as well?
Yeah, obviously, again, especially against Josh. Josh came out to the blocks. I don't think he took 2 minutes, to win the first set. To be fair to the guy, brilliant. Listen, he's got a great future in darts. I think he's just got he's got a good attitude. Of course, he can play darts. He's a great dart player. But, I came back on that stage and I thought to myself, well, Johnny, you're the one with experience here, so you're going to have to put things together, and luckily enough, I did. So, yeah, brilliant. I know I can play the game. I know that I've got everything. It's just put it all together. And by being lazy on the practice board, that does not seem to help, you know. So hopefully I can put things back and win a few more titles.
Definitely, and you touch on the practice there. I've got to mention that match, which is probably going to be most remembered for that epic 104 finish, 18, double 18 ball. It's probably the most cheeky finish that we've seen you take out in a game. Is it something that you've practiced and you've got ready to try if you need to in a game?
Well, I don't mind the bull at all. I quite like the bull finishing, so I practice a lot before matches, like over in the venue before we go on stage. I practice a lot on the bull because I do think the bullseye comes into the game a lot on stage. So I like the bull finishes, but the 18s, it just came into my head. The first thing that came into my head, and I went for it, and luckily enough, it landed, thank God, So, it's a good out. It was a cheeky out, I must admit, but they all count.
Definitely, we enjoyed watching it. Well, that run at the World Championship, again, you get further than you've done before, getting to the quarterfinals, and after that you had the World Series, the Masters, before the Premier League lineup is announced the next day. Leaving the Masters, how were you rating your chances of being picked this year?
Well, mixed feelings again, because I thought to myself, well, I've not won anything, kind of thing. Like the year before, I'd had a few wins. So, but at the end of the season, I thought that my darts had come back into play a bit. I was playing quite good, like you say. I got to the quarters of the world, and I thought maybe I've done enough. I wasn't banking on it because, to be fair, Ross Smith had won his first major. Danny Noppert was in the mix. Jacklin.the, I think he's in the mix. Obviously, Joe Cullen was 2 millimetres away of winning the Premier League the year before. There was a lot of names in the mix. So, when I got that call to say that I was in, great, innit? You know what I mean? 3 years on the bounce. I can't argue with that.
Definitely not. And we had Matt Porter on the show recently, and he said it was the hardest lineup he's been involved in picking for the Premier League. So what was that moment like when you got the call up to say that you were going to be in?
To be honest, it was the Monday before. So, it was quite nerve-wracking. I'd not heard anything, so I thought maybe it's just not my year. And, I've not been picked. But, once that call came and said, right, you are involved in 2023 Premier League, I believe you me, there's a bit of relief on my shoulders then. There's a smile on my face, and it was just pack the case and away to go. Like, do you know what I mean? And obviously to be picked for, I think it's the second biggest tournament. It's the World Championships first, I think, and then the Premier League. Those are the two big tournaments. If you're going to win something in darts, them two have got to be higher on your list. And to be involved in the Premier League, I was chuffed to bits.
Definitely, and we'll finish up looking at this season in the Premier League, but we are 10 weeks into it now, and as I mentioned, you've been on the road for the World Series already this year as well, and you tweeted earlier in the year you were out for a coffee with Mark Webster and you hope that one day he's going to pay for them. Has he put his hand in his wallet yet? No chance. I think he's the tightest geezer I've ever met in my life. It's he seems to go, he orders the coffee and then he seems to look for the seat and then just leaves us then to pay. That's my ambition in life, is to get Mark Webster to pay for my coffee. Well, hopefully that will happen one day this year, and we've got a lot of the Premier League still to come, and you've won the last 2 nights. You've gone up from 7th to 3rd. You're in the playoff spots as well. And just touching on that, the first of those wins in Berlin, did that one mean a little bit more, given how the playoffs in Berlin finished last year, and you've gone back there and won the night? Yeah, 100% it did. But I think more than that, it was the way I was playing. My confidence wasn't there. Basically, I tried new darts just to see how they'd go. Maybe, everything was going through my head. Oh, you're not playing well. Try and change this, try and change that. But in Berlin, my confidence was low. I'd gone back to my old darts, and, I won the night. Yes, I rode my luck on a few legs, but at the end of the day, I always say you need a bit of luck as well as, what you can do on that dartboard. In any sport, in golf, you need that
you need that ball to roll in sometimes for that birdie instead of a par. It's the same in any sport. You need that little bit of luck to go with your ability. So to win in Berlin, it was fantastic.
Yeah, it's come together for you for the last couple of weeks. And just lastly, we move on to this week. You're in Brighton tomorrow night, 3rd against 4th, you against the world champion Michael Smith in the quarterfinals. How are you feeling ahead of that one?
That's going to be difficult, My confidence is high. I've won the last 2 weeks. It's like, let him worry about me. I'm obviously thinking about him because I know how good Mike is. But, I think he's going to have a different mindset, thinking, from Jonny not being full of confidence and not won anything to Jonny's won the last 2 weeks. So I think his mindset will be different. Mine is definitely full of confidence, like I say, and I'm looking forward to the game. Hopefully it's going to be a belter.
We're looking forward to watching it. Well, Jonny, it's a pleasure to catch up with you. We do appreciate the time and we wish you all the best for not just this week in the Premier League, but what else is to come in 2023 as well. And hopefully you'll get that coffee bought for you by Mark Webster at some point as well.
Yeah, I hope as well. Yeah, cheers, guys. Thank you very much.
Free beer, anyone? Now that I've got your attention, the weekly Dartscast are excited to be partnering up with the guys at Beer52 to offer our listeners a free case of beers. Head on over to beer52.com/darts and cover the postage cost of £5.95 to claim your free case of beers from our good friends at Beer52. I've just got on board with Beer52 and as a member each month they send me a case of unique and varied beers from a different part of the world. Imagine that. Each month trying out beers from a different country. In the last 10 years, Beer52 have been to 40 different countries, including the US, Australia and Germany, and they've also included a range of breweries in the UK too. So, to claim your free case of beers, go to beer52.com/darts. Thank you for listening and enjoy the darts and enjoy your beers, and let's get back to the rest of the show. Thanks again to Jonny for joining us now. Moving on to what happened this past weekend, and we've had another Euro Tour, the German Darts Grand Prix, and Michael Smith picking up his 6th European Tour event, his first ranking event since becoming a world champion, beating Nathan Aspinall 8-5 in Monday evening's final. And it brings us on to talk about the world number one, Michael Smith. Is this a sign that he is finding his stride now as world champion?
I think so. And I did say this not that long ago. It might have even been last week, where I said he was just needing to figure out how to get it to play as the world number one and the world champion, how to reset targets, reset goals, and recharge from having done what his life's ambition was. And maybe it just took a little bit of luck. And I don't mean to say that he'd been unlucky up until that point this year. I don't think he really had been. But there is some freedom that you get from playing a tournament where you know you've had luck. And in that first round, Adam Warder missing the darts at double 16, double 8, and double 4 to knock him out in the decider was that maybe that luck that Michael Smith needed. He came back, took out 116 to win the match, a match that he didn't deserve to win the way he was playing. But he got that little bit of luck. And maybe he played the rest of the weekend completely free of the pressures of being world number one, free of the pressures of being world champion. He kicked on as a result of that. I don't know. Only he knows that. But I think maybe he just needed that luck to just get him going, because he was absolutely phenomenal in the next match. He only beat the player who is the player of the year so far this year, Gerwyn Price. And okay, Gezi averaged an appallingly bad, by his current standards, 99.85. But Michael Smith averaged nearly 108. And yes, Michael Smith didn't reach those heights in any of the following matches, but he hit when he needed to. He broke when he needed to against Damon Hedda. After Hedda broke, they were 5-all. Hedda broke to go ahead 6-5. Remember, it's a semifinal, so it's 1-7. Michael Smith broke right back and won the match. And yes, Nathan Aspinall clawed his way back into the final, but Michael Smith hit when he needed to. He hit the double last dart in hand, the double 5. I remember the commentator saying that it looked like it just fell in because he had been missing, but he hit when he needed to, and then he closed out that match 8-5, and he averaged nearly 103 in the match. So Michael Smith figured out how to get it done. Yes, he had that luck in the first match, but I think that's what he needed. And now he can regroup. He has a title. He has a title on the big stage. He's won a night of the Premier League. He's right there in the competition to get to the playoffs this year. He has work to do, but he's in that competition. And now he's done a lot to make sure he'll be seeded for the Eurotour events. Before this event, he was quite a bit back, about 14,000 pounds adrift of the seeds for Eurotours 11 and 12. Well, now he's not safe because there's so much time between now and the cutoff. Cutoff's not until after the World Match Play, but he's back in those spots with a bit of a buffer, and he'll be in the other Eurotours as well. That pressure is now gone. The pressure of having not won on the big stage in a ranking event since becoming world champion is now gone. He has done that. Yes, he hasn't done it in a major, but a Eurotour is still a mini major. It's still 30,000 pounds to the winner. There's no longer those same, there still is pressure. There's always pressure when you're world number one, but there's not that same pressure to prove yourself each and every match like there might have been until he got one of these titles. I think now he can regroup. Now he can remember what it's like to win and know that, yes, it's going to be difficult to win every tournament. Even when Michael Van Gerwen was at his very best, he didn't win every tournament. He just won a little more than half of them. But he knows that he'll win his fair share. And if he keeps pushing along, he'll win more than anyone or almost anyone else. And that's the goal, to put himself in position every time he goes on the Oki to win. And every weekend to put himself in position to win, whether it's a Players' Championship or a Eurotour, or when we get to June, the World Cup, in July, the World Match Play. Those are the goals, to add to the big television title haul. And these events keep you sharp. These events keep you focused. These events keep you tested and make you test yourself. And I think he's learning how to do that. And we saw that this weekend. I think he needed luck. I think he needed luck to just take a little bit of pressure off of him. He got that this weekend. And now I think we'll see why he's the world number one for the next few months.
Yeah, it's hard to argue against that. I think it was Michael Smith that once called the Euro Tours mini majors, and that tells you how important they've become. And it shows you as well, and you touched on it, how quickly things can change. Because if you'd have asked this question on Sunday evening after Michael Smith had just survived those match starts and beaten Adam Warner 6-5 in his first match and averaged 85, is this a sign that he's getting to grips with becoming a world champion? You'd have said perhaps not, but you look at how the tournament finished up for him the next day, lifting the title, and you look back to that first game with Adam, surviving the match darts and stepping up, taking out the 116. Maybe those 3 darts alone, they were a sign. And that 116 finish, that was his 6th visit of the leg. It was an 18 darter to get over the line, and it was his highest score in that leg. He went 58, 59, 83, 8500 to leave that finish, and then he took it out. And what does he do the next day? First match on of the day against Gerwyn Price, beats him 6-2 with a 107 average, and Gerwyn Price himself averaging just under the 100 mark. So it showed that he got that win, perhaps a little bit fortunate, but he went on to make the most of it. And 3 close games after that, the games with Keane Barry, had a 104 finish to get over the line in that one, 6-4. The game, as you mentioned, with Damon Heta, 6-5 down in that one, coming back to get it back to 6-all and surviving a match start from Damon Heta in the decider and coming back and taking out 58 to win that one. And then in the final, he survived a few scares, but he put it all together, 102 average, 8 maximums, 8 out of 13 on the doubles, and it was a complete performance. But it wasn't a complete performance the whole weekend, the whole tournament, and his averages throughout the 2 days that he played, they were up and down. But in the key moments when he wasn't playing at his consistent best, he was able to produce that finish that he needed. And he said afterwards himself, Michael, he rode his luck, had 4 match starts thrown against him, but he's made the most of it. And he said he brought his A game twice in 5 games, and I think that's a fair assessment. Certainly the 2 games he played against Premier League players, Gerwyn Price and Nathan Aspinall, he did bring his A game, and the other 3, his levels did drop, but he managed to get the job done. And there were 3 tight games. 2 of them were decided. One was 6-4, and that almost went 5-all as well. And as you say, you've spoken about Michael Smith finding his feet as world champion, adjusting to having that tag and everything that comes along with it, being the face of not just the PDC, but I guess of darts in general. And he won that title in Bahrain just after Ali Pali. But I think this title probably feels a bit more important for him to get that first ranking one under his belt since the World Championship, and in the midst of what is an awfully busy schedule, to produce that when he needed to. And I'm not sure what the energy levels are like right now, because for these players in the Premier League, they're 10 weeks into that season. We've just had 3 Euro tours on consecutive weekends. It's a lot for the players to deal with, but a title that's going to give Michael Smith confidence the way he closed it out, performed in that final and against Gerwyn Price earlier on that final day. And as I say, how he grinded out the results in the other games as well, and winning titles, that is what any world number one expects to do. And Michael Smith did that at the weekend, and yeah, I think he should take a lot from that.
But let's also talk about the man he beat in the final, the first Euro Tour final after 5 semi-final defeats previously for Nathan Aspinall. How much confidence can he take away from this run going into the rest of his Premier League campaign?
Yeah, I think he'll take a lot, and you'll hear from Nathan's manager, Martin Foulds, in a moment. We asked him about the run to the final this past weekend as well, and Nathan himself on the stage afterwards, he was gracious in defeat, and he said that the way Michael played in the final proved why he is the world number one and world champion. And he said he's going to take the positives from it and go again Thursday night in the Premier League and hopefully use it to have a good run in Brighton this week. And I must admit, watching it on Monday evening, I was surprised that Nathan Aspinall hadn't been in a Euro Tour final before. I just assumed that he had, but his record in semi-finals going into the event was played 5, lost 5 on the Euro Tour, and a few close ones in there to Dave Chisnell and Willie O'Connor, but there are a few more one-sided defeats to Gerwyn Price and Danny Noppert last year. And he has been knocking on the door, but as we've seen, being able to put it all together in that final session of a Euro Tour, 3 games, is tough, and let alone 2 games, getting it right to get through to the final. And I think Nathan's finding that out in the Premier League this year, because he's back in the field this year. It's the first time for him playing under this new format with the nightly tournament, and we've seen he's not won one of those nights yet. He's made a final, but he's lost the most semi-finals out of any of the players in the tournament. He's getting through that first game 7 out of 10 times, which is just behind Michael van Gerwen on that stat, but then he's falling short in the next round. So I think perhaps more than the performances, it's going to be the results that he's going to take out from that run on Monday, getting through to the final, showing himself that he can win more than one game in a session and get into a final. And he's going to need it for the Premier League, because if he wants to make the top 4, I don't think he can just rely on winning one game a night. He's going to have to get to a final and maybe win one of these events, because it's pretty tight between himself, Michael Smith and Jonny Clayton for those last couple of spots. So yeah, he's going to need to find a way of doing that in the Premier League, but I think doing it on the Euro Tour at the weekend, he should take some confidence from it. And we've seen countless times with Nathan Aspinall in the past that he can put a bad night or a bad result behind him. You look to last week, the Premier League, okay, he didn't play badly, averaged 100 and lost in his first game, but it was a result which ended up knocking him out of those playoff spots. And what does he do? Comes back 3 or 4 days later, makes his first Euro Tour final. So I think the confidence is going to be there for Nathan Aspinall going into this week, and he is right there in the mix for the playoffs now, and he's got to go and get the results for these remaining weeks. And it's going to be difficult, as I say, to get in the top 4 without reaching another final in those last 6 weeks of the season, and that's what he's going to have to go and do, I think.
Yeah, I more or less agree. I'll start though just talking about his weekend. I talked about the final briefly, but the run up to that, I mean, he was good but not spectacular across his 4 matches going into that. None of his opponents played all that well against him, but he ran into some players who were playing well. Obviously, Jim Williams, someone we've talked a little bit about this year, but he's currently in the World Match Play spots, played fairly well across his 3 matches, but didn't help the timing in the match against Nathan Aspinall, and Aspinall was able to get over the line. Andrew Gilding, it's a matchup that I don't think the stats really do it justice, because the first 3 or 4 legs, both players were I would say abysmal, but that would be giving them credit for playing better than they had been. It was an atrocious start to the match, but by the end, they still were both averaging in the 90s because they were throwing 14, 15 dart legs at each other at the end. Aspinall probably played his best darts of the weekend over the last 5-6 legs of that match. And then against Joe Cullen, in a match that seesawed a little bit, but Aspinall hit the shots when he needed to. And he wasn't playing at the level that I've been talking about all year that you need to win titles, that at least if you play at that level, you give yourself a good chance. But he wasn't playing that far adrift from it. He was averaging in the low 90s more than the mid 90s. But it shows that if you do it and you have the timing, you can go pretty darn far. And maybe also get a little bit of luck. Having Luke Humphreys, who looked the best player in the field entering, I was about to say Sunday, but this week ended on Monday, entering Monday night. He didn't have it against Joe Cullen on Monday evening in the quarterfinals. That opened it up, and Aspinall took advantage. And Aspinall played fairly well. And you talked about stringing it together. You talked about all those semifinal defeats he's had in the Premier League. Getting that one extra win and playing the 3 matches in succession and playing them maybe not at the standard that will win you the majority of Premier League nights, but will give you a chance in most Premier League matches, will give him confidence. Because yes, he needs to play a little bit better than that to win a Premier League night. He needs, or at least you would expect him to, but he would give himself a chance. If he's playing 3 matches in the low 90s, he's at least going to give himself a chance most of the time. He's going to need someone to do what Michael Smith did to really close the door on him. Can he, though, lift his game and play more consistently at a higher level? I think he can, but he hasn't. And that's the question. Is he going to take out of this that I can string 3 good matches together, or I need to keep working? And I know at the very least I have it in the locker to string 3 good matches together. Let me work and build on this and string 3 great matches together. That's the question. He's right there in the playoff chase, but he needs to step up even from this. This should give him some confidence. This should give him some momentum, as Rod Studd would say. Someone I forgot to mention when we were going through our favorite guests of the last 100, of obviously getting Rod Studd on right as he was getting back from his stroke was one of the other ones I wanted to mention. But to use Rod Studd's least favorite word, maybe Aspinall will have some momentum coming out of this, and that will help him. But he does need to lift his game even more from this. This should let him know he can string 3 good matches together. He's going to need to string 3 great together, because likely getting to the O2 will require him to win a night at some point, something he hasn't done yet.
Yeah, I'm sure Rod's going to enjoy that mention of momentum. Well, let's get to our next guest on this week's show, and he is the boss of ZXF Sports Management. Here's our chat with Martin Foulds. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by the boss of ZXF Sports Management, Martin Foulds. Thanks for the time, Martin. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad. Yourself?
Doing good, thank you. And let's just start with yesterday when we're talking one of your leading players in your stable, Nathan Aspinall, reaching his first final on the Euro Tour. How pleased were you to see Nathan break new ground with that first final?
It was a relief, to be fair. I think he's done five or six semi-finals. Played well in a few of them, just never managed to get over the line. And I think it was becoming one of those things that was in the back of your mind. You constantly like, I keep getting this far, and I just need to get into a final, and then obviously take it from there. So, as you say, he's brought new ground now. So, no doubt we'll see him back in a couple more finals this season.
And we'll come back to more recent events later, but as it is the first time we've had you on the show, let's rewind back to the start and for you and darts. Where did it all begin? When did you first get introduced to the game?
Well, just used to watch the old BDO on the telly back in the day, and then moved out, got Sky Sports, started watching the Worlds when I'm sure John Park played Phil Taylor in one of the finals. I must have gone back 2005, 2006. And yeah, it's been hooked ever since, really.
So is it just watching the game as a fan, or did you ever try and play as well?
No, I was more pool. So when we used to go into the pub when we were younger, yeah, it was always like we'd all play pool. And at the time, a lot of the older generation used to get involved in the darts. All like I said, youngsters seem to congregate around the pool table. So I've thrown a dart since, but yeah, nowhere near as capable as with players.
Well, ZXF Sports Management, that was formed in 2017. How did it all come about, forming your own darts management company?
Right, well, long story short with that, I got introduced to Nathan through a family member. Watched him throw a few darts in the office and asked me if I'd sponsor him, sort of thing. So I went, yeah, I'll put a patch on you. Never done it before. So just went to some events and again, just really loved the actual social side of it. The way the setup was on the floor events, completely different to what you see on the TV. And he was with another management company at the time, left them. I signed him and yeah, within the first 12 months, he'd won his first Pro Tour, got to the World semi-finals and won the UK Open. So I'd say not a bad 18 months, really.
Definitely not. And as you say, Nathan Aspinall, he was one of the first players you had in your stable. Peter Jakes, Ryan Murray, Adam Huckvaler, a few others there. Was it just going to the events with Nathan, you got to meet those guys as well? Yeah,
that was it. You just get chatting to people when you're at the events, get to know them. He recommended Adam to me because he's seen him play. He's a good lad, Adam. Got a lot of talent. Obviously, took a step back the last few years with having his little boy. So, family comes first, I suppose, and it wasn't the right time for him. But hopefully, you never know, might see a resurgence of bad medicine on the tour.
Excellent. Well, I remember early on the pictures of the ZXF HQ with the dartboard and the pool table. You mentioned you played more pool than darts. So, who is the best pool player in the stable?
Definitely me. Definitely me. They'd disagree, but I'd say me all day long. Although Andy Bolton can hold his own as well.
Good doubles partner. Well, is that where a lot of the guys who were local, they'd come and practice? How important was it to have that base for them to come and play away from home but still be out of the spotlight?
It was good for me because I could see, obviously, that the commitment was there from the players. They're willing to travel over. Obviously, it costs you a lot of money every year to send players through Q school all over the country, all over Europe. And it was just nice for lads to come down, put some hours in, and you just see the commitment, really. Like I said, I had Louis down there when he was based up north. Luke Littler's been down. Jakes has been over. Obviously, Nathan, Adam had come down a few times as well. So we've had the lot in, really, at one point or another.
And you touched on it towards the end of 2018. We see Nathan win his first Pro Tour title, and we've seen what he's gone on to achieve in the near 5 years since then. What do you remember about that day? Because I think you tweeted at the time you thought it was going to be a good day that day. Did you have a feeling something big was coming for Nathan?
Yeah, well, it's funny. 2 days prior, I was in Greece, and you probably all heard the story. He was down to nothing. I've always supported him, and I think I disappeared with Little in Pram for about an hour. I've come back, Mrs. Where have you been? I went, I was on phone to Nathan. She said, for an hour? I went, well, yeah, we're just having a good chat. And I just knew from that conversation his head was right. Sometimes that's all you need. Obviously, offered to lend him whatever he needed, really. In hindsight, he didn't even need it because 2 days later, he wins his first Pro Tour against Ryan Still. So.
And a few months later, we're seeing Nathan make his Ali Pali debut, go all the way to the semi-finals. How special were those few weeks? Life-changing as well, given what's come after it for him as well.
Yeah, I actually fancied him to get to at least the quarters, the semis, before the event. Obviously, we're not allowed to bet, so I didn't have a bet on, but if I could have, I think the semi-finals would have been where I reckon it got to. I know we had Gezi at the time, but if you remember, he just come off the Grand Slam. The fans were on his back, and with Nathan being a young, up-and-coming English player at Ali Pali, all the darts in the UK, I just knew the fans would be on his side, and if he got through that match, the draw kind of were there to be taken advantage of that year.
And then comes that first major for Nathan, the UK Open, early 2019. You made the journey to Minehead with Nathan. His granddad was in the back seat. He became almost as famous that weekend. But what memories have stuck with you from that weekend in Minehead?
Probably Grandad Alan in the car. I won't go into the conversations, but there was a few. But no, he's a really nice bloke, and just some of the stories he was telling me and Nathan on way down, they were making Nathan cringe. So and that was a weekend I got on really well. First met Chris Dobey as well.
Yeah, you mentioned Chris Dobey. We'll come back to Nathan a bit later, but we should mention the other players in your stable. The latest addition joining last year, Chris Dobey. I'm sure he wasn't short of offers, but what is the whole process like when you're signing a new player, especially someone who's got that high profile, being top 32, close to the top 16 like Chris is?
I don't know where to start. He was the first high profile player I'd signed that was already established in the top 32. Obviously all the players I've signed are established within the game, but he was established in the top 32, so it was quite a bit of a keep for us as a team really to get him on board. I just get on really well with him. When he mentioned he'd left, he wasn't sure what he was going to do. Like I say, he wasn't sure of offers. And yeah, I think it was the success we had with Nathan and some of the other players, and the fact that I am around a lot and I do speak to players regularly, I think kind of tipped it over the edge for me personally. Plus we have the connections with my other business has an office up in Newcastle, the North East, so about 15 minutes from where he lives. So again, that helps that I go up there frequently to visit that office.
And what a year it's been so far for Chris, winning the Masters that got him into the Premier League. And for yourself as a manager, what is it like preparing your players for the Premier League? Because there's a lot of things we don't see behind the scenes with the travelling, the hotels, and in recent years it's been a short turnaround between the lineup being announced and then that opening night a few days later.
Yeah, it's relentless. It just does not stop. I've been in the Premier League with Nathan before 3 years ago, but we only did about 8 weeks, 7 weeks, and then obviously COVID, everything else was then played behind closed doors for the rest of that event in 2021. So this year has been the first full taste of having to do all the travel arrangements. It's tough on the players. I don't think people realise how tough it is on the players. They're away from home pretty much 6 days a week. Like today, Nathan's landed back about an hour ago, 2 hours ago. Chris, I think the same. We've got less than 24 hours. Then they're back on a train or in a car down to Brighton. And it's like that every week, right up until the summer. But it's a good position for them to be in. It's just, yeah, when people think, oh, well, you're just travelling from nice hotel to nice hotel, until you've done it, you just don't realise how tiring it is.
And we know it differs between managers. Some like to travel as much as possible with their players. Some prefer to stay away from the venues, travel less often. We touched on it a little bit before we started, but what's your approach like? Are you travelling with the players every week?
It's difficult. I have a young family. I've got another business which is relatively successful. So juggling that around with travelling 5, 6, 7 days a week is just nigh impossible for me. I'll go to the Premier League and I will always try and get to most Pro Tours, every TV event, but the European Tour events are probably the one I tend to skip the most. Because the turnaround on those, especially the Premier League, you're home for less than 24 hours. Trying to run a separate business and have a family life, that is difficult.
No, that's fair enough. And having two players in the Premier League for yourself this year, having that smaller stable, what is it like when you see two of your players go up against each other? Obviously, you've got to stay neutral, but how do you approach games like that?
It's gruesome. It's really difficult because you know each one needs the win just as badly as the other. You just got to stay neutral. Try not to get involved. I just tend to... We're all in the back together. When you get on that hockey, you're playing for yourself. That's it. That's brutal, harsh reality. Your friend's off the hockey, but as soon as you step on the hockey, it's about you and you alone. So there ain't no friends when you're up there. And as a manager, you just kind of got to stand back, leave them crack on. And obviously when it's all over, congratulate one and put the arm around the other, so to speak.
Well, let's touch on some of the players in your stable that we haven't mentioned yet. Two of them, Louis Williams, still only 21, but this is his 4th consecutive year on the tour. And then you've got Andy Bolton, more experience, dropped off the tour at the end of last year, but he's having a good start to this year without that tour card. We've seen him on the Euro Tour. He's won a Challenge Tour as well. What are your hopes for those two during the rest of this year?
Well, we'll touch on Louis first. He's young. He's just had a daughter with his partner last year. That on its own is pressure, being a father. Playing on the tour as well and having to win games to obviously push yourself up the rankings is difficult for them. But I think generally on for the rest of this year now. We had some good chats at development tour the other week. So hopefully, fingers crossed now, you'll see a different Lou Williams again this weekend, and he starts firing back up those rankings. With regards to Andy, I always said with Andy, the more darts he plays, the better he is. I know he's found it, again, tough. I think this last month, because he's just been non-stop. We've had Modus Challenge Tour. I think he's done 2 weeks stint in Germany, doing the qualifiers for, I think, 4 Europeans events, as well as the Pro Tour and then the European event as well. So it has been tough for him out there, but that's what he wants. And like I said, the more he does, the better he does get. So I'd expect him, fingers crossed, to again get his tour card back at the end of the year and hopefully qualify for Ali Pali as well to make possibly the European finals.
And then to your youngest player in your stable, Luke Littler, only 16, but he's one of the hottest prospects in the game right now. What's it like having Luke in your stable? Has it been difficult to manage the hype around him, or is he someone who's taking it all in his stride at the moment?
You know, I've just tried to shield him from it. I don't tend to get involved that much on social media anyway. I just don't want him to get... I don't want people to run away with him, so to speak. I saw the hype with Leighton Bennett. Brilliant player, brilliant prospect, but I think I don't know him that well, but he just looks from the outside in that he probably struggled a little bit with the hype and the pressure at such a young age. It's hard for the best of them with experience, so when they're only 14, 15, 16, you've got to bear in mind, remember, they're still kids at the end of the day. I'm old enough to be a dad, so I kind of treat him like I treat my own children, try and shield them from the world outside and just focus on one thing, and his darting ability is off the scale. It really is.
Well, we'd be here a while listing all his achievements so far, but the latest ones that I want to mention, the Riley's qualifier, winning that to get into the UK Open, making his mark at Minehead last month. How did he find that first experience of a major in the PDC?
He loved it, but he was gutted to lose to that game to Adam Garlas. Adam played brilliantly. I think there was one leg just before the break. I think he took out the 170 with Luke sat on, I think it was 6-6. That changed the game. But he still had opportunities, and that's the measure of where he believes he is in the darting world, that he wasn't happy just to walk away with getting to the 4th round. He was gutted that he didn't make the next round, and he had chances to get there, whereas a lot of the younger players would have just been like, wow, I made it to UK Open, I've won a few games. They're thankful for that. He believes he should be pushing on in these events and getting deeper and deeper.
Well, we saw him go deeper in a few events more recently, and that was the development tour, winning 2 titles on his debut of that tour. He's already built up a big lead for a tour card spot. He's in the spots for Ali Pali, obviously only 1 weekend gone, but is it hard not to get excited with what he could achieve this year and where he could be playing his darts next year?
Yeah. You can't get carried away with it. We've seen it before in the past with players storming away after 1 weekend. I just can't see it with Luke. He's got such talent and he's so level-headed. How well he does in the next events, well, it's anybody's guess, I suppose, but I can't see him not maintaining the lead he's got at the top, basically. It's really hard because you don't want to start bigging him up too much and putting too much pressure on him, but the way he's playing at the moment, it's difficult to beat. He's just got that belief in his own ability that when he gets on that dartboard, nobody can beat him. Which there's very few players that have that belief in themselves. I know everyone's got belief they can win, but I just think with it, especially at the youth level, I think he's been the best youth player around for the past 2 years. So stepping up into development probably wasn't as big of a step as we thought it was going to be for him mentally.
Well, 2 more before we let you go, and we're looking ahead now. We've still got 6 more league nights of the Premier League to come. Nathan is also heading to New York for the World Series in June, so there's lots to look forward to for the rest of this year. But what are you most excited about for the rest of 2023?
Seeing if United can actually win the league title. But on the darting front, there's just so much. Chris and Nathan are both in Grand Slam again. Nathan's back in the Grand Slam. Chris hasn't been in it for a few years. I'm looking forward to that event. I love the match play. really don't love going to Ali Pally. And it'd be great if we could get 4 or 5 of them, one way or another, to the Worlds. They've all got opportunities in different routes to get there. So that'd be the one. If I get 4 or 5 of them down there, that'd be absolutely brilliant, and it would make me a year to be fair.
Good luck with that. And just lastly, we messaged a few of your players. We mentioned that we've got your manager coming on. Did they have any questions? One of them got back to us and said, tell him, one of the players says, can you stop being tight, and ask him if he knows which one it is. Can you guess who sent that?
Yes, I probably can. Quite funny. All the time he refers to it. Chris Dobey, any chance?
Yep, that's the one.
Yeah, I got that in one. It's just it's a running joke. I could buy him a 50 grand Rolex and he'd still call me tight. It's probably because I'm like, have you seen how much these flights are? It's like, ton of money, and I'm like, 600 quid, and it's just, it's been crazy when you try to sell bookings out this year, so I knew it was as soon as you mentioned it.
Good man. Well, Martin, it's a pleasure to chat to you. We do appreciate the time, and we wish you all the best with all your players for the rest of 2023 as well.
Yep, no problem. Thank you very much.
Thanks again to Martin for joining us. Now onto our picks for the Premier League. We've got tonight 11 in Brighton this Thursday, and we'll just touch on the picks from last week. It was another good week for me, 3 out of 4. Burton, unfortunately for you, 1 out of 4. But as I just said off air, I'm going to go a bit more adventurous with my picks this week. And let's start with the first game of the night, Dimitri van den Bergh against the leader of the Premier League, Michael van Gerwen. How did you see the first game going?
Well, I did pick Dimi last week, and he played all right, but you need to do a lot better than all right to beat Gerwyn Price right now. You could do great and not beat Gerwyn Price right now. Will he do as well? I don't know, because MVG was just phenomenal against Dobey. And I think MVG needed a weekend off, and skipping the Europe. I mean, it's something that's always something to debate. Should the Premier League players skip the Euro Tour weekends or not? I think right now skipping it was the right move. I think MVG was just a little bit overtired and just a little bit travel weary, and it showed as he dropped off his performance from first match to second match. I think he's going to be well rested. I think we're going to see what he did in that first match against Dobey yet again, and I don't think we're going to see him drop off from there. We're only picking quarterfinals here, but I am saying that I think MVG will win night 11 in the end, but that means he's going to beat Dimitri van den Bergh in the quarterfinals 6-2.
Well, this is where we are going to go different on the picks already, and looking at Dimitri, it is 3 weeks in a row that he's lost in his first game, and 2 of those, they were in last leg deciders, including last week to Gerwyn Price, and this run, it has dropped him to 7th in the table. And for Dimitri, he is in danger of the season petering out now. 6 weeks to go, 6 points off the playoffs. That gap can't really grow much more, or he's going to be out of the running for the playoffs. And going up against the player that is top of the pile, Michael van Gerwen, last week he went up against the informed player in darts, Gerwyn Price. It's been a tough run of games for Dimitri, but we do know that he can beat these players. He's done it before, and as you touched on, Michael missed the Euro Tour at the weekend. He should be coming into this pretty fresh after having the weekend off, and he opened the show last week in Birmingham with that 106 average to beat Chris Dobey, then lost in the next round to Jonny Clayton. So we know that Michael can start the night with a big average. He doesn't need a few games from the other players to go on first to warm up. So you know what? I'm feeling brave this week, maybe a bit overconfident after the last few weeks, so I'm going to take a few risks this week. I'm going to go with Dimitri to get the win, 6-4 to the Belgian to get this night off to an interesting start.
Well, let's see if you'll make it 2 consecutive interesting picks. Chris Dobey averaged 106 last week. Wasn't nearly enough. Currently 6th in the table, going against Gerwyn Price, who's 2nd in the table. How do you see this one?
Yep, I certainly am going to be mixing out this week. We weren't talking about Gerwyn Price at the end of last week. He didn't win a Premier League night or a Euro Tour title, but his levels have still remained pretty high over the last week since we've spoke about him. 102, 101 averages in the Premier League, then 199 averages on the Euro Tour at the weekend. So, okay, the averages are dropping. It should be panic stations. No, in all seriousness, he is still playing at a very high level. Chris Dobey, he's maybe not got that same consistency, as you say, averaged 106 and lost in his first game last week, and then had a few mid-90 averages at the Euro Tour at the weekend. But I think he's playing fairly well, and I think he is due a few wins in the Premier League, and I think the first one's going to come here. And like with Dimitri, a little bit away from the playoffs at the moment, does need to start picking up some wins. I think he's 5 points off the top 4. So I'm going to go for another upset here. I'm going to go with the top 2, both going out in their first game. I'm going to go 6-4 to Chris Dobey.
Yeah, this is definitely a tricky match because I think both of these players are playing very well right now. I mean, Gerwyn Price, as we've said, has looked the best player in the world for the last year on a month now. But Chris Dobey, as you mentioned, hasn't gotten the results. We've both been saying that, but it's not for want of performance. Yes, he had a dip in the middle of that 6-week losing streak where he lost after winning the first night of the Premier League, lost quarterfinal 6 matches in a row, and he had a couple of down matches in the middle there. But he just as often had a ton-plus average that wasn't enough. Last week being the crowning jewel of that with a 106, but it's not like he hadn't averaged 99 and lost first match the time before. This is a really tricky one. I think Gezzi's going to go through a little blip right now. I think it's only natural. He can't be playing at a 108 average every single day, but he can come pretty darn close. I think Dobey will get over the line in this one. You said 6-4. That's what I was going to say. I'll say a last leg decider just so that we don't have exactly the same pick. But I think we're both going for the upset here. I like Dobey to at least stay on the fringes of the playoff race by getting a win over the guy in second.
Third quarterfinal in Brighton, and it is the runner-up in the Premier League last week. Peter Wright going up against the runner-up on the Euro Tour at the weekend. Nathan Aspinall, how do you see this one going?
It's tough to gauge Peter Wright right now, and we talked about it last week. We've talked about it a few times, but particularly last week, that maybe there's some signs that he's starting to find his feet again, and I don't think he's gone forever. I think Peter Wright will have another surge in him, and it would not surprise me if by the end of the year we're talking about him as a legitimate contender to defend his World Championship money from 2 years ago. We know at his best he can be world champion. He's only done it twice. He's won the world match play as dominant as anyone almost ever has a couple years ago. But he's nowhere in that same stratosphere right now. But I think he's starting to figure it out again. I think it was a long blip. I think having his wife in the hospital while he's preparing for the World Championship just took him out of his game and took his entire season out of its normal course. And he's been dealing with that at the start of this year. Nathan Aspinall, he's kind of like Chris Dobey right now, hasn't been getting all the results that he needs, but it's also because he's had some really poor semifinals. I think, though, this is going to be Peter Wright's moment. I think Peter Wright's going to get the points. I don't think he's going to make it 2 consecutive nights to make the final, but I think he is going to at least start to claw up to maybe try to put that race for 7th or 6th, get a little bit more money, save a little bit of pride out of this Premier League, and beating Nathan Aspinall will go a long way towards that 6 legs to 4.
Yeah, I mean, a penny for the thoughts of Peter Wright right now, because he made his first final of the Premier League season last week, beat Michael Smith, the world number 1, 6-1, that 1-2-5 checkout. That was actually the only thing I saw from last week's Premier League, but what a finish that was. Ball 25 ball, and then beats Gerwyn Price in the last leg and just falls a leg short of winning the title, losing 6-5 to Jonny Clayton in the final, and a few days later goes to the Euro Tour and goes out first game, gets beaten, I think 6-1 in the end in that one. So I think that the form line does favour Nathan Aspinall, even though Peter made the final of the Premier League last week. Nathan Aspinall, he's got a little bit more recent form getting to that final on the Euro Tour, like we've spoken about, and he has got that strong record in Premier League quarterfinals. Michael van Gerwen, he's won 8 out of 10. Nathan Aspinall's next on that list. He's won 7 out of 10. So we have seen Nathan more often than not get the win in these opening games, and I went away with from the favourites for the first 2 games, but I'm going to go back to the favourites here. I think Nathan Aspinall is going to take this one. I'm going to go 6-3 to the runner-up in Munich, and it's going to be a win which, for the time being, would put him back in that top 4.
All right, so far 2 matches we disagree on, 1 we agree on. Will it be 3-1 or will it be a draw in terms of our agreeing? Last match, Jonny Clayton, who after winning consecutive nights is up to 3rd, going against Michael Smith, who is fourth. How do you see this one?
This is a hard one, and I think this is a matchup that we always look forward to. It's always played in good spirit between these two players, and at the start of the night, it is third against fourth in the table, and Jonny Clayton, although he went out to a Andrew Gilding masterclass at the weekend, he was 6 out of 6 on the doubles to beat the Ferret in that one, should still be on a high. He's won the last 2 nights in the Premier League, and we've seen him jump up from 7th 2 weeks ago to 3rd, and he's now got a 2-point gap over 5th place. And again, just shows you with this current format how quickly things can change. And Michael Smith, he's dropped to 4th in the table. I think this is going to be the closest to the 4 quarterfinals. I'm going to go with it to go to a last leg, and to make it interesting, I'm going to go for Michael Smith, which would mean that Jonny Clayton, Michael Smith and Nathan Aspinall would all be on 17 points after the quarterfinals. And if my picks do come off, of course, then that would mean Nathan Aspinall against Michael Smith, the winner, would go into 3rd on 18 points. So yeah, Michael Smith to win it in the last leg, 6-5, to set up that shootout, Nathan Aspinall in the next round.
Ooh, that would be an interesting semi-final, but as we already know, it's not happening because of Peter Wright's beating Nathan Aspinall. The question is, will either of them be there? And I think it would be at least half right. I mean, this is a tough one to pick. Jonny Clayton has won consecutive Premier League nights, although he hasn't looked the best player possibly on either of those nights, but that doesn't matter. He won. He hit when he needed to. He won both those nights as a result. Michael Smith wasn't the best player over the course of the entire weekend in Munich, but he was when he needed to be, and he certainly wasn't beating Gerwyn Price in the last 16. I think Michael Smith's going to use that title to propel him in what's, I think, a slightly more important match for him. Jonny Clayton, not just has he won 2 in a row, but he won more than anyone last year, and he topped the table last year, and he probably needs to keep going to have any chance of topping the table this year. But he knows he can get points in clumps, and he's playing well enough to do it. He can forward a loss, even if it drops him out of the top 4, because he knows he can win another night or 2 over the next month. Michael Smith needs to keep pushing on, and I think he's going to come out playing just that little bit better. I think he wins the 6-3. I think he temporarily, well, I guess that's not enough to jump Jonny Clayton yet because he's won fewer nights, but it'll put him in within one match of moving into 3rd in the table. And I think that's what Michael Smith's goal is, to end the night in 3rd and to end the night with there being 4 players with multiple titles. But as I've already said, Michael will win the title, just not Michael Smith.
Well, as we've touched on, it is a big week in the world of darts. It is our 300th episode of the podcast, and it is also the Torremolinos Darts Festival. So let's get to our final guest on this week's show. He is one of the organisers of that festival, and he's also the chairman of the BDO. Here's our chat with Des Jacklin. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by one of the organisers of the Torremolinos Darts Festival, Des Jacklin. Thanks for joining us, Des. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great, thank you.
Good to have you back on, and lots to get to, but first of all, it's an important week, not just our 300th episode of our podcast, but where are you calling from and what are you up to this week?
I'm calling from sunny Spain. We are in Torremolinos for the Torremolinos Festival of Darts. It started yesterday and runs until Friday this week.
Excellent. Well, we'll come back to Torremolinos a little bit later on, but when we last had you on our show, we were talking backstage at the Circus Tavern. The men's final of the 2019 World Masters had just started. Then it was all eyes onto the O2 for the BDO World Championship. But what were those few months in between like, the build up to that first World Championship away from Lakeside for a long time?
Well, I think for most people, there was a lot of anticipation. I think a lot of people were excited about the prospect of what was going to happen, what wasn't going to happen, the new venue. Of course, I'd got a verbal agreement with the new venue for, I think it was 10 years. I'd signed with them for a couple of years. So we was, as far as venues went, I think I ticked the boxes for the World Championships. But for me, in particular, it was quite a nervy few months. We was on tenterhooks with sponsors. Thought we had some really good sponsors. I was promised some really good sponsors, and unfortunately they fizzled out. So that for me it was a nervous time, I have to say.
And sticking with the venue, the Indigo at the O2, it is a lovely venue. It's been used for exhibitions before. Last year we had the Viking Cup there as well. What was the feedback you received on that change of venue after the event had been put on?
Well, everybody that went thought it was absolutely amazing, which it was. For me, it's the best venue in the country. I don't think that there is any venue to beat the O2. It's the world's premier venue for any event, and if you can put a crowd of people in there, of course it has to be a large crowd, but if you can put a crowd of people in there, it's by far and away the best venue. For me, it's the best venue in the country. It's the best venue the darts has ever had, I think.
And a big talking point that week was the drop in prize fund as well, the men's winner receiving £23,000. How difficult was that whole situation to try and work with that week?
Well, we have to remember I got the call that the biggest sponsor that I was promised, I got the call on Christmas Eve. It was last thing, end of the day on Christmas Eve, and I was told, sorry, Des, we don't have the sponsor. It was done deliberate. I had lots of challenges to face whilst I was running the BDO, whilst it was a going concern, let's say, and it wasn't too much of a shock in hindsight. At the time, I was absolutely bowled over with that statement. No, we haven't got the main sponsor. So, of course, what could I do? I had to call around the players, tell the players this is what we're faced with. We either cancel the event, which I didn't want to do, and legally I don't think I could, because people had signed the previous year at the previous World Championships to, if they had qualified, to come back. So I would have faced libel suits from 40 odd people if I didn't put the event on. This was explained to every single player individually that I would have to drop the prize fund. I said to everybody, every single person, they was given a figure. And it was the lowest possible figure that I could pay them out for as prize money. And the general consensus from all the players was we must keep the first round losers at a decent payout. So these people have got to come from America, Australia. So we have to keep the first round losers at a decent payout. And it was always going to be the winner and the runner-up that received the biggest deficit in what they were previously used to. But every player was told this, before New Year, and every player was given the opportunity: do you want to play for this money, or do you not? And of course, quite famously, Fallon Sherrock declined her invitation. I think it was probably the best thing in hindsight for her, but she declined her invitation, but nobody else did. So, I think a lot of people overlook the actual facts of what happened, but there it is in a nutshell.
No, it's definitely good to get that out there. And March 2020, of course, the world shuts down with the pandemic, and around that time you resigned as chairman of the BDO, but a month later you were voted back on. So can you talk us through those series of events? Well,
I was getting a little bit, it was really weighing me down. The job was really weighing me down in the lead up to Christmas. So there was an awful lot of pressure on me. And the pressure was coming from all sides. I since learnt afterwards that a lot of the pressure that I was getting from a lot of people was a planned execution. It was something that had been that the wheels had been put in motion, sort of like September, October, the previous year, and. They executed it well. I was told that who to trust and who not to trust, but I took people on face value. There's nothing else I could do. I had to take people on face value. I had to do the job to the best of my ability, and that meant taking a lot of people on face value. Of course, what we must remember is that when I took the role on, I wanted my own team in. To do a job, and I wasn't allowed that. I was allowed a certain amount of my own team, but when I explained the reason why I needed these people in to do jobs that I couldn't do, I was told that no, that we want to have a say of who comes in. So from the word go, it was a little bit. It was a bit of a challenge, for me. So when Christmas came and I received an awful lot of hate mail, death threats like you wouldn't believe. The death threats. I mean, you get a death threat, 1 or 2 death threats, and you think, oh well, somebody doesn't like me. But when you receive 18 in the period of a week between Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, and I think to myself, God, has somebody got no better thing to do with their time other than send Des Jacklin and his family a death threat, telling me to watch out on the steps of the O2 because I was going to get what was coming to me, and I really tried to shrug it off, but it plays on your mind a little bit, especially when you have your family with you. So of course I had the whole World Championships thing, and then the pandemic, when we set out for Torremolinos. Torremolinos was going to be such a fantastic turnaround for us. I was going to show why Torremolinos was in the calendar and why it was such an important event to the BDO. I mean, when I took over the BDO, I think Torremolinos had made something along the lines of £15,000 in 17 years. I think that was the amount that was in that account. The Torremolinos tournament account was £15,000 over 17 years. I took over it the previous year, and I think I made £19,000 in 1 year. So £19,000 in one event, a week's event, although there's a lot of work that goes into it and leading up to it, but £19,000 is a huge amount to make to a company such as the BDO at that time. So, and it was just going to help take over. Then the pandemic hit while we were here, and it was I set off here on the Friday. So in England, I set off from England on the Friday. Spoke to Jose, the manager, as I was at the airport. Jose said, "I don't know what's going on. Everything's normal here. The world seems to be shutting down, but everything is fine here." About 3.5 hours later, when I landed into Malaga Airport, it was literally like the opening scenes of 28 Days Later. There was just nobody in the airport, and it was such an eerie, scary feeling. And when I went outside and there was no taxis, no people in the street, and all you could see was, birds flying, and there was nobody in the street, it was a really scary thing. So I managed to get somebody to pick me up and take me to the hotel. And of course I was called straight into the manager's office. Literally, whilst you was in the air, the country is shutting down. We think that at the moment we're open, and there are people that are actually flying here to Torremolinos for the event. People are in the air, but we can't really say without any sort of give you any definitive answer until the government announced. And of course the government didn't announce until the Saturday. And most people had either arrived at the hotel, or were in the air, or was at the airport and didn't know what was going on. And everything just couldn't have come at a worse time. And yes, in those few days when everybody's flight was cancelled and we were all stranded here, and we all had to take evacuation flights. I mean, that's what they were called, evacuation flights. And just everybody, it sounds a little extreme, it sounds a little bizarre, and thinking back, I know exactly how it sounds, but I felt like I was getting blamed for the hotel shutting down and Spain shutting down. And actually, I felt like it. When you saw on social media, I was blamed for it. How can I possibly be blamed for a pandemic? But everybody needs somebody to blame, and I suppose I was as good as anybody at that time. But the hotel closed everywhere. The world closed, and we had to fight to get people's money back, which I did successfully. I fought to get everybody's money back, bar one person. One person didn't get their money back, and that was because I just refused to act for them anymore. And I acted for the rest of the group, and everybody either got their money back or their holiday rolled over to the next year that was cancelled, and then the following year, which was taken. So, which was last year. And it's at that time it was really quite bad for us, me in particular. But we get through it and we move on.
Yeah, certainly a time that no one will forget, and almost 3 years on now, there's been a lot that's gone on in those 3 years. And one thing I wanted to speak about was the county system, which used to be run by the BDO. That's now being run by the UKDA. Yourself and your wife Paul is still active on that scene, playing for Lincolnshire. How do you feel the UKDA have done in that role the last few years?
Well, I think it's very, very difficult to say, because if I say honestly how I feel, I think some people it's going to sound like sour grapes. But what people just didn't realise was the BDO was two different entities in the BDO. There was what we called the professional game, which a lot of people argued that it wasn't a professional game, but to us it was, one side was the professional game, and then one side was counties. Well, there was never any issue with county. There was no issues with counties at all. County could run itself. It had the perfect setup. And what UKDA did was they promised the world to everybody. They put the fees up. So of course you put fees up, and you're going to be able to get more out of it. But then they changed just for the sake of changing, for the sake of saying we are different to counties. This is a national league now, and not the old county way. They changed 9 games to what they added games on. So they changed 9 teams in the Premier to 12 teams in the Premier, and then which added 2 extra games on a year, which was absolutely crazy. It cost the counties more money, and I honestly didn't think the left hand knew what the right hand was doing. And a lot of people, the people that don't support me, let's put them into that category. Let's say it's the people that don't support me or didn't support me. They'll say that it's sour grapes on Desi's behalf, the way that the new the National League is run by the UKDA. It's just not. There was nothing wrong with how counties run, and I actually put a plan together in which to put extra money, extra revenue into the BDO county system, which everything would have stayed the same as it was, except there would have been more money in it. Instead of everybody paying £1 a year, which was absolutely crazy to be part of a national league, instead of everybody paying £1, it went up to, I can't remember how much it was now. I think it was probably £5. Although I think we put out 3 different options. But it was never broken. It should never ever have been touched. And now the same people that campaigned for the UKDA have contacted me. Des, what can we do? Can we do anything about it? You don't want to know what my answer is, and my answer can't be aired, but it's not the nicest of answers, and it equates down to you've made your bed, now you lay on it. Because as far as I'm concerned, I look after Lincolnshire, and anything really above and beyond Lincolnshire, I'm not really that interested in, if I'm honest with you. I have a great group of people. I have some really good support from everybody that plays for me. I've made some really, really rash decisions that people get why I do it, and I think it keeps us in the Premier. We do what we do, and I think Lincolnshire's a happy county.
What's been grabbing the headlines a few times over the last few years with regards to the BDO has been the trophies, and we've seen recently they've gone up for auction, and Trina Gulliver, one of her sponsors, got the Women's World Championship trophy, gave it back to her, donated it to her. There's been a few times where your name's been in the news with regards to that. Can you talk us through what these last few years have been like in regards to yourself getting back the trophies from players?
Yeah, well, so I'll try and keep this one as short as I possibly can. So what happens is I was the chairman of a group that I was voted in to do. So I was the protector of that group. I was the person that no matter what, the book stopped with me. So when the BDO, the professional side of the game went bankrupt, that was the side that everybody believed owned trophies, but it wasn't, because the BDO was originally set up back in the early 70s, and the trophies and everything stems back from the early 70s. That was the BICC. That was the county side. So the trophies actually belonged to the counties. So when the trophies were kept by players, and John O'Shea, he was really, really silly, and he took some really bad advice to keep his trophy. But he came out in sympathy for Wayne Warren, who made a statement to say he didn't know what he was getting. He didn't know his prize money, when I have a text from his girlfriend that says that he knew exactly what he was getting before he played. Of course, I could post that on social media, and everybody was, but it would be turned around one way or another. I have learned that I will never win an argument in darts. I will always come off the losing end. So when Wayne Warren decided that he was going to keep the trophy, I had no option but to try and retrieve the trophy. Because he was in England, it could be done through the police. So I got in touch with the police. The police went to his house. I think that, I don't want to talk out of turn, but I think a search warrant was got. Went to his house, found the trophy, took it back. I was then told that I had to pick the trophy up in person. Now, there was a lady, I shan't say her name, but there was a lady that was the secretary of the BDO that lived within a few miles of the police station where the trophy was being held. Her husband at that time was working as a courier. She wasn't allowed to pick it up on behalf of the BDO. It wasn't allowed to be given to a courier. It wasn't allowed to be transported to the Lincoln police station or the Gainsborough police station. The only way that trophy could be taken back was if I got it in person. So, of course, it was in the time of the pandemic when nobody was allowed to travel, and I received a letter from the sergeant of the police station down in South Wales saying that due to extenuating circumstances, Mr. Jacklin is allowed to travel here, collect the trophies and take it home. So then the Sun newspaper got hold of this one, and the Sun newspaper, 48 hours before the story broke, knew the truth, knew the story. They knew that I was given permission, yet they still printed a false story about me. I think it's wrong. It shouldn't be allowed to happen. It created hundreds and hundreds of the most vile comments all over social media about me and my wife, yet again, for doing something that we were legally, not only morally, had to do, but we were obligated legally to take that trophy back. So that trophy came back to us, and then John O'Shea, in sympathy, came out for Wayne Warren and said that he wasn't giving his trophy back. But because John O'Shea lives in Southern Ireland, the rules are different. So I had to do this legally through court. It cost me an amount of money, and it went backwards and forwards, and eventually I got judgment on the court day, and it was said in open court that anybody who thinks that keeping the trophy from this organisation was the correct thing to do was an absolute disgrace. And that goes out to every single person that thinks that those trophies should have been kept. It's absolutely disgraceful thinking and disgraceful behaviour to think that it's acceptable to keep a trophy for no good reason at all. So the trophy was returned. My expenses was paid by John O'Shea, and then of course John O'Shea made his statement on social media. Good old social media is always the place to air everybody's problems, isn't it? So social media then got another battering, and I got another battering for legally being obligated to take these trophies back, and then again the rest is history.
There's plenty that's gone on there, and good to get your side of the story out there. And I know there's been another one more recently. Lakeside last year, you picked up the Women's World Championship trophy, and I know there was rumours about the police being involved, but I think yourself, you said on social media that it was pre-arranged you were picking up the trophy at that time. Can you talk us through that one as well?
Yes, it was agreed that Mikuru wanted... it wasn't even Mikuru that was withholding the trophy. It wasn't Mikuru's management that was withholding the trophy. It was the owner of a company that was involved with Mikuru that did not want to give the trophy back until an amount of money was paid. And I said that I was not liable to pay this money back. It was an argument that went on for several months, but in the end, it was agreed that the trophy would be given back. And the next available time that the trophy could be given back was at the Lakeside of last year. So I made arrangements to go down and collect the trophy. I never saw Mikuru. The trophy was not taken from Mikuru minutes before she played. It was Mikuru's management team that came out, met me in the car park, put the trophy. I never took the trophy from them. They put the trophy in the back of my car. I believe somebody filmed it, quite bizarrely. The trophy was put in the back of my car, and I left, and that was it. Mikuru was not involved in the exchange. She knew that the trophy was going back, but I think as far as Mikuru was concerned, it could have gone back the year before. But of course, it's just far better to sensationalise things on social media. And I mean, even I believe somebody actually said that they saw the police there. That's completely untrue. It's completely untrue. It beggars belief, but you know what goes on, what people expect, and what people want is usually completely different things.
Well, it's a chapter that thankfully now everyone can move on from, and yourself, you're still officially the chairman of the BDO, but when you look back on your time involved with the Masters, the World Championship at the O2, how do you look at it all now?
I look at it with a lot of relief, a lot of regret. I wish things had gone differently. I wish I had listened to a couple of friends around me rather than not listening to them, and rather than seeing the good in people. I trusted so many people that I shouldn't have trusted. People were setting up companies behind my back, having meetings with me, telling me how things was going to go on, and setting companies up behind my back. One day there was other people telling me how I should be doing things this way, and then for people to tell me that I did things to benefit my wife. That's absolutely crazy. I would never ever do anything to try and further Paula. She's big enough and bold enough to do that on her own. She either wins game or she loses game. Clearly she loses games when they're televised, but she either wins game or she loses games. And you know what? We're happy the way things are. I look back on my time with the BDO and I just wish things had been different. I wish that I listened to those people that were friends that could see what was going on. And I wish I'd have done a few things slightly different. Let's not forget, I was called into the office of the BDO's accountants about a month after I took over the chairman's position. And I was told at that time, BDO had maybe 18 months to survive. You just have not got the money coming in. The BDO has not been run as it should have been to make money. It never has been. There's been money dipped in here, there, and everywhere for years and years and years, and you just can't save it. You can't save it. So of course, nearly 3 years later, when I'm called into the office with the accountancy office, and I present a plan in which to save the BDO from everything. This plan is what I've had passed by the bank, by a liquidator. proper business people that do it for a living. I had this plan passed, and the accountant tells me, yes, this plan will work. This is how the BDO should have been run years and years and years ago. It will work. And then everything just, you have so many people around you that you trust. You expect them to do a job, and they don't do it. And they turns out they're working against you deliberately to further somebody else's organisation. And I can't believe how we got to that place, but we did. And I have to take responsibility for getting to that place, because, it's all well and good me saying this happened behind my back, but I was put in a position when it shouldn't have happened behind my back. Unfortunately, it did. I couldn't run it as if it was my own business. Certainly, if it was my own business, there would have been people there that shouldn't be there. That they would never have been there. But it wasn't my business. I had at the time 64, 65 counties, all with 2 delegates, all who believed that they knew how something should happen, and then that's it. It's. A lot of people say I took over a poison chalice. I don't truly think that that's 100% correct. I think everything can be saved. I've had other businesses that weren't great, and we managed to save them and turn them around. It's the only thing that's ever failed that I've been involved in. I've never had anything that's failed apart from the BDO that I've been involved in. But unfortunately, there was just too many people with too much to gain if the BDO failed. And unfortunately, that's what happened.
Well, let's look to the future before we let you go, and better times. And as we touched on at the start, you're in Torremolinos, the Torremolinos Darts Festival going on this week. I saw from your social media it's a sellout this week as well. Just talk us through how this whole week works, what goes on during the festival.
Well, it's a 7-day event. We sell a 7-day package, but of course, again, county system, I was promised that the county dates wouldn't clash with Torremolinos, and lo and behold, they did. So we had to adapt ourselves. So we flew back over a few months ago, spoke to the manager. We managed to get a 5-day package. It flies in the face of the Melia group. It goes against everything what they stand for, but they did it for us, and I think they did it for us because they know the event has been running now for almost 50 years. I believe next year is the 50th year that the Torremolinos Open has been running. So I have a great relationship with every different manager on every different level in this hotel. And so we struck a great deal up for this. It's the kids' holidays for Easter. So £549 gets you 7 days, all inclusive, all food, all drinks, all entertainment, and of course you can play the sport that you love, darts. So the package usually starts on the Sunday. It's Sunday to Sunday. So Monday, which was yesterday, we had the mixed triples event and the mixed pairs event. That was played down to the finals, and the 2 sets of finalists play off on Friday for the title. Today is the first of the singles events. That starts at 7 p.m. Tonight, and that's played down to the final, men's and ladies. Tomorrow is the men's pairs, ladies pairs, again played down to the final. And then on Thursday, it's the second of the men's and ladies singles, which is played down to the final. And we've thrown in a youth event because obviously there's been more youngsters that wanted to come. Any time of the year they want to come here, but because it's in the holidays, doesn't cost you to take your children out of school if you do it in the holidays. So we've got plenty of kids here as well that want to play in the youth. So we've got, I think it's nine different events, all with the final played on Friday. And then, of course, if you haven't had enough darts, there's a bus trip that's put on, and everybody goes down to Gibraltar, which is about an hour's drive away for the Gibraltar Open. I have to say, I think that this year is the best that we've ever done. Not only because we've about 350 people here, but not just because of that. We've got the big ballroom downstairs. where the darts setup is. We're playing it at an evening, which means the day is yours. The weather has been immense. I've been here since last Thursday, a couple of days to set up, a couple of days to relax, and then 5 days to run the competition. The sun has been in the sky with no clouds and it's been, I don't know, we've had about 9-10 hours sunshine a day, every single day. It's been a minimum of 24 degrees. Yesterday it was up to almost 30. It was touching almost 30 degrees. It was just absolutely, a fantastic week. We get it at a great price. The food is great here. The accommodation is fantastic. The facilities are great. The people are lovely. They'll do anything for us. And we run a good event.
Good to hear. Well, Des, it's a pleasure to chat to you. We appreciate you taking out some of your time to join us. I know it's a busy week for you over in Torremolinos, and we wish you and the guys all the best for this week and what else is to come this year as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And you too as well. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. I'm now going to get on anyway because I've got some work to do for tonight's event. It's the first singles, as I said. So thank you very much for taking the time to invite me, Alex. Thank you.
Thanks again to Des for joining us now. We're going to finish up the show with a listener question, and it comes from one of our good friends of the show, Matt Langan, who says, what comment from a guest surprised you the most over all these years and interviews?
That's a tough question, and I was thinking about it earlier, and I couldn't come up with a good answer, but I did think there's always things that surprise us. We've talked about our favorite interviews of all over the 6+ years that we've been doing this, and a lot of it is just learning about the players, which is just a complete surprise for some of the players we know nothing about. Starting, I think Darren Johnson was the first one like that back in episode 9, so 291 episodes ago. But there's been plenty others. But we did have some surprising comments just a few weeks ago when we spoke with Ian White, and he talked about his kidney stones that he had. We had no idea that he had been playing all of last year in agony, and it makes sense. It was a significant drop-off. He went from qualifying to every televised event to not even qualifying for the World Championships, and suddenly he's back and he's qualifying for every Euro Tour event this year and putting himself in contention to qualify for all the television events. Probably won't make the World Match Play this year because he left himself so much to do, but maybe he will, but he'll probably qualify for everything else. So it made sense, but it's something we didn't know. But I can't really think of that many really surprising comments that our guests threw at us. Obviously, we've had media players on. We've asked Dan Dawson some absolute garbage, and he's given it right back to us, and same with other people. But I don't think anything really surprising. There's some that in retrospect seem surprising. And, go back to one of the first seasons. I don't know if it was the first or second time we had Barry Hearn on. We asked him about there being a women's tour, and his answer was, are there going to be a tournament for people who part their hair to the right? Or tour for people who part their hair to the right as opposed to people who part their hair to the left. And now the women's series is one of the PDC's main tours. It's one of the 4 tours that they do, obviously the Pro Tour, but as well the Challenge Development and the Women's Series. And it's something that's growing in popularity, growing in participation, and growing in prestige. It already has a television event. So it's one of those comments that in retrospect is surprising, because someone who generally sees where the market is with such clarity, missing that there was such a market there. But there was not something that was clear at the time. And it was something that I don't think at that time we thought we would be talking just a few years later about the women's series being such an established and important part of the PDC calendar. So I don't know what surprised me at the time, but those two, one recent, one from a long time ago, are the two surprising comments that came to mind.
Some good picks there, and I think for me, I'd still put Justin Pipe high up on that list for the answer to this question. And we're going back a few years, late 2019, to that chat that you had with Justin when he spoke about when he was at the peak of his powers, I guess, and an official told him that if he got into the top 4 of the rankings, the PDC would change the rules and he wouldn't be in the Premier League. And that was listening to the interview afterwards, because I wasn't involved in that one, and hearing those comments certainly surprised me. And a few other ones we've had, you mentioned about Ian White being very open and honest about his health, and another one was Ross Bulmer, who was so open with her health and the battle that she's had with cancer, beating it twice. A very inspirational lady, but she was very willing to talk about it. And another one that we've had was Aaron Beanie, and he came on just after he won his tour card at Q School, and he said after I think it was the second day, he'd lost his first couple of games. He wasn't playing like he wanted to, and he did consider when he woke up that third day or fourth day not even entering the tournament, and he ended up entering in it, and he went all the way and won his tour card outright. And they're insights that we wouldn't usually find out about. And you mentioned him earlier, the chat that we had with Nathan Aspinall around this time last year and the comeback from injury. And back then we didn't know how serious the injury was, but as he revealed to us in that chat, it could have potentially ended his career. And those early weeks for him back on the tour, he still wasn't sure how long he was going to be able to carry on playing for, and if he might have to take some time out to have an operation. And I remember that being one of the rare times, I think that week I was in the press room at the UK Open, and Paul Nicholson came up to me and said, that was a great interview with Nathan, good work. And we had comments from our listeners as well, getting in touch on social media, and nice to always get that recognition. But it's what we're here for. We give the players, we give our guests that platform. There's no time constraints with us. We reach out to potential guests. We say, do you fancy coming on for 10 or 15 minutes for a chat? But sometimes, as you've seen with a couple of our guests this week, it can end up being a little bit longer. And one more I'll give a mention to, and this is another chat that you had, Burton, and that was with Glenn Durrant, who's another player who's always been generous with his time to us. And it was just after he won the Premier League, and he said how he'd got stage fright on that finals night of the Premier League. He couldn't feel his legs, and he described it as like he was walking in mud that night, and he went on to go and win the title. So that was a surprising comment that came from him. But again, I think like we were talking about earlier with our all-time favourite guests, there's been a lot of memorable moments from those chats, and we just hope that you guys have enjoyed listening to them as well.
Yeah, indeed. And I thought about the Durrant one as well. And also you mentioned that one after the Premier League. Also surprising, he was obviously the following, or I don't know if it was that night or the following morning, he tested positive for COVID. But that was a surprising after the fact revelation, but not too, because he was obviously unwell when he was speaking with us, but it was still such a interesting interview. But anything else for this weekend for the first 300 episodes?
Well, we have to say, as we always do, a thank you to our guests who have joined us on the show this week, to Jonny, to Des out in Torremolinos, and to Martin for their time. Thank you to our sponsors as well. Our main sponsor, Dartwolf. If you want more Dynamite Darts content, head on over to Dartwolf.tv. Give Dartwolf a follow on Twitter at Dartwolf180. And to our friends at Beer52, if you want a free case of beers, just pay the postage. Go to beer52.com/darts, and that one was just for Dan Dawson, who enjoys our call outs for them. And we are delighted to have got to another century with this podcast, and we couldn't do it without our loyal listeners. So a big thank you to everyone who continues to download and listen to the show each week. If you've been with us from episode 1 to now, or you've come along at any point during those 300 episodes, and just want to say thank you for spending all that time with us. And thank you to everyone who helps us with the show. To you, Burton, what a co-host you are. Great to be working with you, and our producer Hannah, our regular contributor Matthew Kiernan. Thank you for all their hard work they've done for us, and to people behind the scenes as well. You mentioned Dave Allen at the PDC, the guys there, the guys at the other organisations, the WDF, the ADC, Modus, the seniors, the manufacturers, the managers, anyone who's helped us with putting us in touch with guests or arranging interviews for us. They've all helped in their own way, so we appreciate that. Thanks to everyone for the support, and until next time, enjoy the darts.
Yes, indeed, and I echo what you said about me. I think I am an awesome coder, but no, you are too, and it's been awesome doing this for 300 episodes so far. Okay, I think I missed like 4 or 5, so for 290 something of them, it's been great to be here alongside you. But we'll be back for episode 301. We'll discuss what double we double in on when we do 301 double in. We'll then prepare for episode 302, which is the greatest 6 darts in the history of darts. So a lot to plan and prepare for as we start the 400 of the show off with some big episodes. But until then, hang tight, enjoy some darts, enjoy some darts while hanging tight, and hang tight to enjoy some more darts.